Chapter 2 of It Happened in Egypt. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. It Happened in Egypt by Charles Norris Williamson and Alice Muriel Williamson. Chapter 2. Cleopatra and the Ship's Mystery. Now, at last, I can skip over the 3 days at sea, and get to our arrival at Alexandria, because, as I've said, the exciting part began soon after, at Cairo. They were delightful days, for the Laconia is a Paris hotel disguised as a liner, and no man with blood in his veins could help enjoying the society of Bridget O'Brien and Rosamond Gilder. Cleopatra, too, was not to be despised as a charmer, and then there was the human interest of the protégés, the one with the eyes, and the one who had reluctantly developed into the ship's mystery. Still, in spite of Biddy and Monny and the others, and not for them, my heart beat fast when, on the afternoon of the third day out from Naples, the ship brought us suddenly in sight of something strange. We were moving through a calm sea, more like liquefied marble than water, for it was creamy white rather than blue, veined with azure, and streaked, as marble is, with pink and gold. Far away across this gleaming floor blossomed a long line of high-growing lotus flowers, white and yellow against a silver sky. The effect was magical, and the wonder grew when the big flower bed turned into domes and cupolas and spires rising out of the sea. Unimaginative people remarked that the coast looked so flat and uninteresting they didn't see why Alexander had wanted to bother with it, but they were the sort of people who ought to stop at home in London or Birmingham or Chicago, and not make innocent fellow passengers burn with unchristian feelings. Soon I should see Anthony and hear his news. I felt sure he would be at Alexandria to meet the ship. When Antoun Effendi makes up his mind to do a thing, he will crawl from under a falling sky to do it. As the Laconia swept on, I hardly saw the glittering city on its vast prayer rug of green and gold, guarded by sea forts like sleepy crocodiles. My mind's eyes were picturing Anthony as he would look after his wild Balkan experiences, brown and lean, even haggard and bearded, perhaps a different man from the smart young officer of everyday life, unless he'd contrived to refit in the short time since his return to Egypt, a day or two at most, according to my calculation. But all my imaginings fell short of the truth. As I thought of Anthony, Mrs. East came and stood beside me. I knew she was there before I turned to look, because of the delicate tinkling of little Egyptian amulets, which is her accompaniment, her leitmotif, and because of the scent of sandalwood with which, in obedience to the ancient custom of Egyptian queens, she perfumes her hair. I don't think I've described Monny Gilder's aunt, according to my conception of her, though I may have hinted at Biddy's. Biddy, having a habit of focussing her sense of humour on any female she doesn't wholly love, may not do Mrs. East justice. The fact is, Monny's aunt is a handsome creature, distinctly a charmer who may at most have reached the age when Cleopatra, Antony's and Caesar's Cleopatra, died in the prime of her beauty. If Mrs. East chooses to date herself at 33, any man not a confirmed misanthrope must believe her. Biddy says that until Peter Gilder was safely dead, Clara East was just an ordinary, well-dressed, pleasure-loving, novel-reading, chocolate-eating, respectable widow of a New York stockbroker, superstitious, perhaps, fond of consulting palmists, and possessing Billikens or other mascots. How many women are free from superstition? Slightly Oriental in her love of sumptuous colours and jewellery, but then her mother, Peter Gilder's stepmother, was a beautiful Jewish opera singer. After Peter's death, his half-sister gave up novels for Egyptian and Roman history, took to studying hieroglyphics, and learning translations of Greek poetry. She invited a clairvoyant and crystal gazer, claiming Egyptian origin, to visit her at her Madison Square flat. Saïda Sabri, banished from Bond Street years ago, took up her residence in New York, accompanied by her tame mummy. Of course it is the mummy of a princess, and she keeps it illuminated with blue lights, in an inner sanctum, where the bored-looking thing stands upright in its brilliantly painted mummy case, facing the door. About the time of Saïda's visit, it was noticed by Mrs. East's friends, this according to Biddy, that the colour of the lady's hair was slowly but surely changing from black to chestnut, then to auburn. She was heard to remark casually that Queen Cleopatra's hair had been red. She took to rich Eastern scents, to whitening her face as Eastern women of rank have whitened theirs since time immemorial. The shadows round her almond-shaped eyes were intensified, her full lips turned from healthful pink to carmine. The ends of her tapering fingers blushed rosily as sticks of coral. The style of her dress changed, at the moment of going into purple as second mourning for Peter, and became Oriental, even to the turban-like shape of her hats, and the design of her jewellery. She did away with crests and monograms on handkerchiefs, stationery, luggage, and so on, substituting a curious little oval containing strange devices, which Monny discovered to be the cartouche of Cleopatra. Then the whole truth burst forth. Saïda Sabri's crystal had shown that Clara East, née Gilder, was the reincarnation of Cleopatra the Great of Egypt. There had been another incarnation in between, but it was of no account. And like a poor relation who has disgraced a family, the less said about it the better. The lady did not proclaim her identity from the housetops. Rare souls possessing knowledge of Egyptian lore might draw their own conclusions from the cartouche on her notepaper and other things. Only Monny and a few intimates were told the truth at first, but afterward it leaked out, as secrets do, and Mrs. East seemed shyly pleased if discreet questions were asked concerning her amulets and the cartouche. Now, I never feel inclined to laugh at a pretty woman. It is more agreeable, as well as gallant, to laugh with her, but the trouble is, Cleopatra doesn't go in for laughter. She takes life seriously. Not only has she no sense of humour, but she does not know the difference between it and a sense of fun, which she can understand if a joke about somebody else is explained. She is grateful to me because I look her straight in the eyes when the subject of Egypt is mentioned. Sheridan from Harvard has been in her bad books since he put Ptolemaic rulers outside of the pale of Egyptian history, called their art ornate and bad, mentioned that each of their queens was named Cleopatra, and classified the lot as modern, almost suburban. Mrs. East, leaning beside me on the rail, was burning with thoughts inspired by Alexandria. She had Plutarch's Lives under her arm, and Hypatia in her hand. Of course she dropped them both, one after the other, and I picked them up. "Do you know, Lord Ernest," she said, in the low, rich voice she is cultivating, "I don't mind telling you that I felt as if I were coming home after a long absence. Monny wanted to see Egypt. I was dying to. That's the difference between us." "It's natural," I answered, sympathetically. "Yes, considering everything. Yet we're both afraid. She in one way, I in another. I haven't told her. She hasn't told me. But I know. She has the same impression I have, that something's going to happen. Something very great, to change the whole of life. In Egypt, Khem, it seems to me I can remember calling it. You know it was Khem, until the Arabs came and named it Misr. Do you believe in impressions like that?" "I don't disbelieve," I said. "Some people are more sensitive than others." "Yes, or else they're older souls. But it may be the same thing. I can't fancy Monny an old soul, can you? Yet she may be, for she's very intelligent, although so self-willed. I think what she's afraid of is getting interested in some wonderful man with Turkish or Egyptian blood, a magnificent creature like you read of in books, you know, and then you have to give them up in the last chapter, and send them away broken-hearted. I suppose there are such men in real life?" "I doubt if there are such romantic figures as the books make out," I tried to reassure her. "There may be a prince or two, handsome and cultivated, educated in England, perhaps, for some of the swells are sent from Egypt to Oxford and Cambridge, just as they are in India. But if Miss Gilder should meet a man of that sort, I should say she was too sensible and clear-headed. Oh, she is, almost too much for so young a girl, and she has a detestation for anyone with one drop of dark blood in America. She doesn't even like Jews, and that makes a friction between us, if we ever happen to argue, for, maybe you don't know, my mother was a Jewess. I'm proud of her memory. But that's just why, if you can understand, Monny's afraid in Egypt. Some girls would like to have a tiny flirtation with a gorgeous Eastern creature. Of course he must be a bey, or prince or something, otherwise it would be infra dig. But Monny would hate herself for being attracted. Yet I know she dreads it happening, because of the way I've heard her rave against the heroines of novels, saying she has no patience with them, they ought to have more strength of mind, even if it broke their hearts." I wondered if Biddy, too, suspected some such fear in the mind of her adored girl, and if that were one reason why she had turned matchmaker for my benefit. Since the first day out she had used stratagems to throw us together, and it seemed that years ago, when she used to teach the little girl French, Monny's favourite stories have been of Castle Killeena, and my boy